But our next speaker is Andrew from Refuge Recovery. Andrew, are you there?
Yeah, just unmuted myself. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, great. Well, thanks for having me on here, Latanya, and thank you for sharing about Al-Anon, Terry. I don't know about crosstalk rules on the speakers jam, but boundaries are boundaries, and enabling and stuff like that is something I'm actually working on right now in a kind of complex way. So I appreciated hearing at least, I think, about half of your share. So I'm here to talk about Refuge Recovery, and also just a quick thing. Really, it's two groups. We only put one on the thing here. Also Recovery Dharma, which is essentially the same thing. It's just a split off. There was a bit of a split in the nationwide fellowship, but what it comes down to is essentially the same thing, just a different name. There were some personalities on one end where it got a little complicated, probably pretty similar to some early day issues that the 12-step fellowships had. And we are also a very young fellowship, so there's been some growing pains, and in the last year or two, it's actually gotten a lot better, and we are on a national level growing. So what it is essentially it's a Buddhist-inspired path to recovery. The first thing I always like to say to people who are interested in it is it does not require that you become or start to identify as a Buddhist. So in that way, it's similar to some 12-step stuff where you might talk about God, but it's not like, okay, you got to be Christian now. So similar kind of idea. It's more of a focus on spiritual principles, which at the end of the day are pretty universal, regardless of where they come from, just basic human spiritual principles. And with Refuge, it's less of it doesn't say, let's leave God out of it. You can do the higher power thing if you want to, but with Refuge Recovery, it's not necessary to, hey, you have to find a higher power. One of the big things in the Refuge book that has always struck me is that within you have everything you need to grow and to achieve awakening, which is basically like a full, conscious and happy, balanced, loving life. And part of the reason there's a fellowship and a program for it is it's not just like you get clean and everything's, okay, I have it all within me, so here we go. It can be hard to find. You have to do some digging and some healing, and support from other people, which is really huge. So I don't know if I said this before, but I'm Andrew, and I'm recovering drug addict. So I'm in recovery from addiction to drugs. I'm going to talk a little bit about my background, and then I'll share with you guys how I came to Refuge, and just my recovery journey in general. So I'm 33 years old. I have just a little over 2.5 years clean, and I started experimenting with drugs when I was 14, and basically from the first time that I smoked marijuana, it was like, okay, that's what's missing. That's what's been missing from my life. Just kind of this tense, depressed, distant kid. And when I smoked weed, I was like, I felt like how a level of joy and happiness and just kind of peace within myself that I was like, okay, that's why I see other people at least having a little bit of that sometimes, and I never really experienced that. Maybe when I was real little, like 2-3 years old. but not as somebody who's getting to know the world. And from there, it became different things, amphetamines, benzodiazepines, lots of drinking, and experimenting with heroin and opiates as well. I became first time I got addicted to heroin was I was 20. I had been drinking alcoholically, and actually, I think I was binge drinking to such a degree that I did something to my gut, and it became actually pretty unpleasant to drink. I think I overdid it to an extent where I hurt something, or my body started rejecting alcohol, and so I was like, oh yeah, I remember heroin. I like heroin better anyway. So I went down that path, and had to go into rehab when I was 21. I had dropped out of I was in a good school, middle class family, didn't really want for anything, and through an excellent education opportunity away at Clemson, from smoking weed around the clock, drinking around the clock, and doing cocaine and other stuff whenever I could find it. Literally did not do anything but that. And actually, even before that, so that was before the first time I got addicted to heroin. Even before that, I remember the dark period, that period where you realize, like, cool, I get to use drugs and be high as often as I want, which is really what I want, right? When you realize that there's a darkness to that, and that you can't really get away from it. I actually experienced that during college. Which is when you're supposed to be having fun doing that stuff. And so I went down a little deeper with heroin and other drugs after that, and ended up in treatment in Florida. I got the treatment center I was in Florida had some pretty aggressive, for the time, pretty aggressive, like, behavioral modification stuff. And it actually, in a way, in this way, it kind of helped trick your brain, trick your ego into being clean. I wouldn't say I was happy, but it gave me a break from what I had been doing. So at the end of the day, it was a relatively positive experience. But then after that, after staying clean for about a year, the cycle of, about 10 years of relapsing, getting clean for a little while, relapsing again and again and again and again, in and out of detoxes, a couple psych wards, one more treatment center, living in my car for a little bit, and 12-step meetings, having sponsors that, having free sponsors who gave freely of their time to me. I had a lot of experience of remembering that I couldn't even really put full sentences together, and I would talk in these circles, and just such a level of confusion, and being they're just aware enough to know that, like, man, like, I must be hard to listen to. I must be hard to have people be there for me, and remembering that all these men in the 12-step fellowships were just so patient and kind with me, and I filed that away, and I wasn't really in a place where I would take little steps forward, and then a bunch of steps backward, and really struggled to find myself during that 10-year period. I remember I was so disconnected from who I was, or who I thought I was, that I would essentially, I couldn't work a fourth step, honestly. I would be it's interesting because I remember being as honest as I possibly could be, but really trying to be be honest, but being so confused, it was hard. Um, and it was interesting, the people that I identified, or the people that I identified as having real recovery and having a story that was powerful, were all people that had completely destroyed their lives, externally, you know. Um, and I'm sitting here like, I've never been to prison. I've overdosed a couple times, but these guys have overdosed 10 times. I haven't lived as a homeless person for an extended period of time. And these guys who are clean are have experienced that. And comparing out in that way, like knowing since probably the age of 16 or 17 that I was an addict and that it was a one-way street, it was a one-way train, and it wasn't going to get any better. I've known that since I was 17. But then I would come to meetings and hear messages. It's like, oh man, I haven't fucked up my life enough. I haven't fucked my life up. I'm sorry if I'm not supposed to curse in this, Latanya. Is that?
You just share your
Okay,
truth.
okay,
What that
okay.
looks like. Yeah.
All right, okay. So I haven't screwed up my life enough. And I have no idea who I am. So I'm just comparing and trying to identify and connect with people, but really having a hard time. And I remember, I used to be too embarrassed to share this, right? But I remember lying on a fourth step, which is not unusual, right? But not leaving things out, right? I put every bad thing on there. I lied and created a couple bad things so that my sponsor would be like, oh yeah, you're one of us. Because I knew that addiction was going to kill me, but somehow I did not belong in AA or in NA. And as I've done a lot of work on myself, looking back, I recognize that is a deep thing. That doesn't really have as much to do with 12-step stuff. That's more like I feel this sense of I don't belong anywhere. And so I kind of laugh about that now that I added shit to my fourth step, to try to make it, to try to force this, like, yeah, I belong and I've hit bottom, right? And but as a result of that, or partially as a result of that, I ended up, like I said, going in and out for 10 years. And I would say that my bottom is my bottom is the emotional and spiritual despair of really fucking trying hard to get better and tripping myself up, and the sense of lack of connection because I can't be honest with myself or others. It's a really, it's a really, really lonely place. And I love the 12-step fellowships. And in fact, I kind of mix it up. But part of my story is this deep resentment that I had for 12-step fellowships. I was like, this isn't working. I'm doing the work. I've done work through the steps for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Works. Done some of my amends and some of my living amends. Trying to live in 10, 11, 12, and it's just not working. Now I'm kind of like, it's just where I was in life. But at the time, I was really, like I said, really resentful at NA and AA and the people in it. Other than acknowledging the several men that I mentioned before were so willing to give freely of their time for free, moved me then, and it moves me now. And I don't think I'd be alive if not for those men, and not just sponsors but friends. and we were really close. So that resentment for 12-step fellowships, that inability to look and see that it's me, like I'm watching other people get better, and I just can't connect. And some of it also was the being hung up on some of the God stuff. I was raised Catholic, and I couldn't really hear when it would be said over and over and over, like, "Hey, you don't need. It doesn't have to be the Christian God, right? You can have your own higher power." I couldn't really truly grasp that and hear that. I couldn't help but look at the higher power, the God of my upbringing, as the one. And I had some issues with Christianity and Catholicism. So it was all just this big mess. And I ended up about 3 years ago, after having given up on getting clean. I hadn't shot dope in about 4 years. In fact, it went from dope, right? It went from, at some point, maybe 6, 7 years ago, it went from dope to regular heroin to maybe a little bit of that, but with some street fentanyl in it. And not only was that deadly, but I actually really couldn't stand the habit. I would have to wake up 3, 4 times a night to dose just to go back to sleep, so that I could stop shaking and sweating and all that. I'd get sick every couple hours on that, and that drove me crazy. I was like, I miss heroin. I miss being able to do some and then go to sleep and then wake up. Yeah, I wake up sick, but I get to sleep. And so I ended up in a psych ward in Florida, and didn't hadn't shot dope since then, because I was like, maybe I'll consider it if they have some street stuff, if they have what I used to do. But I actually, at the end of the day, I don't want to die, and I don't want to have that kind of a habit again. So for the last couple of years of my using, it was kind of interesting and kind of backwards in terms of having a bottom and consequences. My life was externally more manageable than previously. It was pretty unmanageable externally for a while, but I was on Suboxone maintenance for about a year, and smoking weed and taking amphetamines, and just this mixture cocktail. And what I discovered was that my life seemed manageable. It really wasn't. I was miserable, but I reached that place of like, so my addiction is not visibly killing me right now, but it's so empty. It's so unsatisfying. It's not what I wanted was to get a handle on my cocktail of different drugs, and I got that, and I realized this still really sucks. And my family held this like non-dramatic intervention on me, and I didn't care about my life anymore. But seeing them all crying, disappointed and crying and kind of hopeless for me, and they're like, "We want you to go to an outpatient." So I did, and this place in Boston, Virginia, was unlike any treatment or detox or any kind of experience I'd ever had. People were talking about trauma. People were talking about the issues underneath addiction, the causes, some of the probable causes of the symptom that is addiction. And so I got to air some of that stuff out, but I was really inspired by other people. I would just sit there and watch and just be at first horrified at how open people are being and how they're not being like aggressively told this is wrong or you shouldn't have that mentality. So I was inspired to share and air out without judgment by other people my cynicism, level of just this cynical attitude that I had picked up about recovery in general, based on my 10 plus years experience of trying and not really making any headway. And the beginning of the level of healing and forward movement that I have started there. And one of the reasons that actually ties into talking about refuge is, and Buddhist-based recovery, is they had a big emphasis on mindfulness, and they had someone that would lead meditation. And if you can imagine somebody that's coming off, I was coming off of being on Suboxone maintenance for a year and a couple other drugs. And if you can imagine someone in that state trying to meditate, it's funny to me now. But the meditation teacher and yoga teacher was like, yeah. I was like, no. Like, I'm detoxing. I can't meditate. And she was like, well, why don't you try? And for some reason, the way that she was able to say that to me just totally disarmed me. And I was like, okay, I'll try. And meditating while I was detoxing was what you can imagine, right? But I was able to tune into my body hurting, feelings coming up, the hamster wheel that was my mind, and even just trying to tune into those things. I have a hard time explaining it to this day, but I viewed it as a failure to meditate because I couldn't concentrate. But even trying to meditate in that state did something to me that opened me to being just this feeling of aliveness and compassion and empathy for myself that I hadn't had since before I started using as a teenager. And I remember saying, like, well, they would recommend I go to meetings, and I was like, nope, I'm not going to NA, I'm not going to AA. Like, I got big problems with them. And I said to the meditation teacher, who wasn't really trying to get me to do anything, but I said to her, I wish there was a fellowship that was based around meditation. And she was like, well, guess what? There is. And she told me about Refuge Recovery. And so I found a meeting there, and I found that space that I had found, that meditation, in regards to recovering from an addiction, and in regards to trying to have a new life and feel alive and connect with people, was already existed. Now there was only a few people that went. It had just started in Chantilly. There's one guy who started 2 meetings. There was only a few of us, but that was enough. Like, I had so much anxiety, social anxiety and shame and all that stuff that we probably all come into recovery with, that big meetings were too intimidating for me anyway. So just a few people was fantastic. And I've basically been doing that ever since. The first time I've ever felt like I belonged anywhere was when I started chairing one of those meetings when the guy who started it had to leave town. So I got to do that and felt belonging for the first time. And it's been 2+ years of Refuge. It's still a small fellowship. And the way I like to explain it to people is, it's, at the end of the day, it's very similar to AA and NA. There's work you do. There's an inventory process that's similar to a 4th step. There's you work on cultivating spiritual principles. It is just based, instead of being based on 12 steps, it is based on the Buddha's Four Noble Truths, which outlines addiction as a symptom of a basic human thing, which is suffering is caused by craving. And that can be all different kinds of things: craving for something to go away in your life, craving for something pleasurable, or craving for something that's unpleasant to go away. And the way forward, the way through addiction, is obviously a lifelong process, but it's there are spiritual principles that we cultivate that help to end that suffering that is addiction. And one of the ways that we do that is meditation can help us become more aware of what's going on, and help us cultivate other things like being aware of our intention, the speech that we use in speaking with other people, what kind of actions we're taking, what kind of work we're doing in our lives, the amount of effort, how much mindfulness we're able to cultivate, and things like that. I find that Buddhism has some deeper stuff that is hard to put into words in English, at least, but that's okay. Right now, I'm working with meditation. As I said, the benefits are huge, and you can start meditating on day one of your recovery journey, as I did. I still find it to be difficult sometimes, but just like anything in life, the things that are difficult you can do anyway. The benefits are huge. I will also say, let me check on the time here. Okay, so I'll also say that as a small fellowship, we've like I imagine every fellowship has had so far, some challenges with COVID. We were having some trouble with meeting attendance. We actually recently just switched down from 3 meetings a week to 1. And the meeting, and as soon as things go back to whatever the new normal is, I'd say we're going to try to go back to probably 3 meetings a week, at least in the Northern Virginia area. I guess y'all are in Maryland, but I'm not sure exactly what Maryland's Refuge Recovery or Recovery Dharma situation is, but we are, since it's Zoom, it doesn't matter where you live, and we are currently having a Sunday at noon Zoom meeting, and that is should be good. It's going to have 5-6 people, plus like I have my number on the Refuge website for people looking for meetings. So I get about 1 to 2 calls a week of new people who are interested in trying this different thing. So if anybody is interested in checking out Refuge, when I'm done here, before I get off, I'm going to put in the chat my phone number, and you can text me and I can send you the Zoom link to our meeting, which is Sunday at 12. You can participate and then watch some Sunday football right after. So I think that's all I got in terms of my share.
All right. Does anyone have any questions for Andrew? Well, I have a question. Do you have a website that you could put in the chat now that people could like look more into your pathway?
Yeah. Yeah, let me get that here.
My other question is, do you do meditation in the meeting?
Yes, so that's a great question. Thank you. So every meeting starts with just a go around and a couple readings that outline what Refuge is about. And then once that's all done, we go straight into a 15 to 20 minute guided meditation. Usually we pick one person as a service physician to read the meditation out of the Refuge book or the Recovery Dharma book. And those meditations can be anything from just a mindfulness of the breath, a basic breath meditation, to a forgiveness meditation where you ask, mentally and quietly for forgiveness for things that you've done to other people, things that they've done to you, and things that you've done to yourself. That's actually a really powerful one. There's a compassion meditation where you try to cultivate compassion for yourself, for other people, people you love, and difficult people, that's really powerful. And there's a couple other ones as well that help to cultivate that. And that stuff can be really powerful, especially when you do it regularly, I've found. And also doing it as a structured part of the meeting, doing it as a group is huge. Because a lot of us have found that when you're new, when your emotions and your body and your mind are all over the freaking place, trying to meditate can be really scary. So doing it with a group of people, there's something about it makes it better.
All right. Well, thank you, Andrew. Everybody give him